Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to completely shatter a massive myth. It's a myth that Wall Street heavily relies on to make billions of dollars off of everyday people just like us. And it's this idea that building true wealth requires complex, active, high-effort trading. But what if I told you the exact opposite is actually true? What if the wealthiest, most successful, everyday investors are literally the ones doing the absolute least? Okay, let's dive into this.
$1 million. It's the universal retirement target, and there's a very specific, mathematically sound reason for that. Decades of research back up what we call the 4% rule. Basically, if you have $1 million properly invested, you can safely withdraw 4% of it, so that's $40,000 every single year, without ever draining your principal balance. Because the market historically grows faster than 4%, your money is actually replenishing itself in the background. It is literally a machine that pays you to simply exist.
But how do you actually get there? Does reaching that $1 million mark mean you need a genius-level intellect, secret inside information, and this constant drive to outsmart the market? Or does it just require aligning yourself with the market's natural upward momentum? We really need to shift our thinking here. We have to move away from the traditional idea of effort equals reward to a totally new paradigm, alignment equals reward.
Section 1. The Complexity Trap. Why trying harder often makes you poorer.
From a really young age, we're all taught this simple formula, right? Work harder, get better results. But when it comes to investing, this mindset is an absolute trap. On one hand, we have the illusion of control. This is the investor who's constantly checking stock prices, obsessing over the news, trying to time the market, and just reacting to fear and greed. Sure, it feels productive, but honestly, it's exhausting and incredibly error-prone. On the flip side, we have the power of alignment. This means setting up a super simple, automated system, walking away, and just letting time and the global economy do the heavy lifting for you. The more decisions you make, the more chances you have to get it wrong.
Section 2. Decoding investment funds. Finding the right vehicle for your wealth.
To build that automated system, we first need to look under the hood and decode the actual vehicles people use to invest their money. There are three main structures you're going to run into. First up, index funds and ETFs. These passively track a big list of companies like the S&P 500 for a practically invisible fee, usually around 0.03%. Then you've got actively managed mutual funds. Here, you're paying about 0.5% to 1.5% for a human manager to try and pick winning stocks. Finally, there are hedge funds, which charge a massive 2% fee plus 20% of your profits for extreme high-risk strategies. Now here's the absolute kicker. According to the SPV's scorecard, over a 15-year period, more than 90% of those expensive, actively managed large-cap mutual funds completely fail to beat the simple, cheap index fund. So yeah, you are literally paying a premium for worse results. And hey, this isn't just theory. Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest stock picker alive, famously made a $1 million bet back in 2007. He bet that a super boring, passive S&P 500 index fund would beat 5 hand-picked hedge funds chosen by a top Wall Street firm over a decade. So what happened? Well, Buffett's boring fund delivered 7.1% annually. Meanwhile, those highly paid hedge fund managers with all their incredibly complex strategies and steep fees, they average an embarrassing 2.2%. Let's make that math feel a bit more visceral. Imagine you invest $10,000 over 30 years with an 8% average return. If you use a simple index fund with that tiny 0.03% fee, you end up with roughly $99,000. But if you use an actively managed mutual fund with a 1.2% fee, you only end up with $72,000. That 1.2% fee silently ate $27,000 of your potential wealth. It is the silent killer of your financial future.
Section 3. The Over-Diversification Illusion, the 20 ETF Trap.
So, if active management is out, a lot of people decide to buy ETFs instead. But then they fall right into a brand new trap. It's this psychological urge to buy 20 different themed ETFs in a misguided quest for safety. You might buy an S&P 500 ETF for stability, a NASDAQ ETF for tech, maybe a large-cap growth ETFs, and an ESG fund. You think you've got 5 different buckets of safety, but because these funds are weighted by market cap, massive companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia completely dominate all of them. You haven't actually diversified, you've just created a massive redundant overlap. It's basically like putting on 5 different raincoats all at the exact same time. You aren't staying any drier, you're just making it impossible to move. And it actually gets even worse with something called factor cancellation. Let's say you buy a growth ETF because you want those high-flying tech stocks, but then you get nervous, so you balance it out with a value ETF. You are literally paying 2 different managers to trade against each other. They totally cancel each other out. You're left with the exact same broad market return you would have gotten with a single, simple index fund, but you are footing a much, much higher bill.
Let's look at the real damage of being an ETF collector. Over 30 years, investing $10,000 annually, the optimizer in scenario A, who buys just one simple total market ETF, ends up with $2.12 million. The collector, in scenario B, holding 20 different niche ETFs with slightly higher fees, ends up with $1.91 million. That complexity, along with the fee drag, just cost the collector a staggering $213,000. Think about that. That's an entire house lost, just for the privilege of having a messy brokerage statement. No way.
Section 4. The Lazy Millionaire System. Build it once, let it run forever.
All right, so it's time to strip away the clutter. Let's move into the actionable solution and outline the exact structure that mathematically wins. This is the legendary 3-fund portfolio. Honestly, it is the ultimate lazy millionaire protocol. Step 1, a total U.S. stock ETF. Step 2, a total international stock ETF. Step 3, a total bond market ETF. That's it. With just 3 simple tickers, you own virtually every publicly traded company on Earth, plus a stabilizing layer of high-quality bonds. You get zero overlap, the lowest possible fees, and absolute clarity.
Now, look, we're all human, right? It's completely natural to get the urge to tinker with things. So here is how we safely manage that instinct. You keep 90% of your money in that boring, untouched 3-fund core. That is your compounding machine. The remaining 10% is your satellite account. This is your play money for those high-conviction bets on specific tech or market trends. But you got to remember the 5% rule. If a niche fund isn't something you believe in enough to allocate a full 5% of your total portfolio, it's just statistical noise. Drop it.
Section 5. Mastering the Mindset. Surviving the Emotional Journey.
Okay, here's the brutal truth. The absolute best system in the world is still going to fail if you don't master the psychological traps that inevitably pop up when the market gets rocky. Fear will try to convince you to sell at the very bottom during a crash. Greed will try to pull you out of your boring system so you can chase high-flying thematic trends right before they collapse. And impatience will make you constantly interrupt the slow compounding process. This behavior gap is very real. The famous Dalbar study showed that while the S&P 500 returned 10.35% over 20 years, the average everyday investor only took home 9.24%. They literally traded their way out of wealth simply by reacting emotionally.
To survive, you really have to understand the timeline here. Phase 1 is years 1 through 5. Honestly, it feels completely invisible. You're putting money in, but the balance barely moves. Most people actually quit right here because they mistake slow growth for no growth. But if you hold steady, you hit phase 2, noticeable momentum. This is where your returns actually start to add up and confidence builds. Finally, you hit phase 3. Unstoppable. This is where compounding fully takes over and your investments are actually generating more wealth each year than your own physical labor.
Ultimately, this brings us to a really striking philosophical contrast. There is a massive difference between being rich and being free. Being rich is having a high income, but also having high expenses, which creates a total dependency on your active, stressful effort. Being free is entirely different. It's having controlled needs and letting automated, simple systems replace your active income. Freedom is not about how much you earn. It is about how little you depend on your active presence to survive.
Which leaves us with this final question. Are you building a life that just looks successful? Or are you building a life that actually feels free? True wealth comes from ruthless simplicity. It's about removing the clutter, keeping fees near zero, and letting time do the heavy lifting. Please, don't let Wall Street convince you that you need to be stressed out to be successful. Take a hard look at your accounts today, clear out the overlap, and reclaim your time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this empowers you to optimize your financial future today.